Hi everyone, and welcome to today's free event at the Context. My name is Valentina, and I am an art historian and a tour guide living in Sicily. Today, we are going to talk about the bone-chilling catacombs of the Cappuccini monks in Sicily, more specifically, the catacombs in Palermo. Now we are gonna go through a general history of mummification. Now we also are going to investigate and try to understand what are the mummies and how are mummies made. Do we have example of mummification in Italy? And let's see what kind of example we do have around our country. And then we will also focus about the catacombs in Palermo. We will try to understand why more than 8,000 mummies are to be found in Palermo inside the Capuchin catacombs. Now let's say that mummification is a ritual and a practice of preserving a body. It's something that we found in many cultures everywhere around the world and also through many centuries. The Aztec or the African or ancient European civilization, they always used this technique to preserve the body of their dead. But also, what we know is that the rituals related to mummification they can vary. In some of those cultures, they reserve this burial only to the wealthy society. And some others, they were reserving this burial to all the other citizens, to all their citizens. But how are mummies made? Mummies, in the process of mummification, it involves removing moisture from the deceased body and using some chemicals or some natural elements. Most of the time, they use the resin to desiccate the flesh and the organs. But also, mummies are created unintentionally or accidentally, and this is what we call natural mummification. As I told you before, we do have many examples of mummies everywhere around our country, from the north to the south. I just found a few of the most evident example. This one, for example, are mummies found underneath the crypt of the church in the deep north of Italy, in Friuli Venezia Giulia. This is the church called the Church of Venzone, and those mummies were founded. In a first moment, some scientists they thought it was a fungus that preserved those mummies, but then some other scientists they made another study, and we are now sure that those mummies were once again naturally created because of the abundance of calcium phosphate in the soil of the crypt excavated underneath the church. We do then have some other example to be found in central area of Italy. I'm talking about the mummies of Ferentillo, which is a small town in Umbria. Over there in 1500 was created the Church of Saint Stephen. And over here we do have example of once again a natural mummification. Is not the only example to be found because in Urbania, not far from here, but in another region which is called Marche, we do have example of other mummies. which were founded inside a very fascinating church, the Church of the Dead, and there was a confraternita, so there was the confraternity of the good deaf, which around 1600 and 1700, they were helping poor and ill people to get free burials. And once again, those mummies were founded underneath the apsis of the main altar. Well, now at this point, it is almost clear that this technique of the mummification is to be linked to the ecclesiastical environment. And more specifically, we should link the use of this burial ritual to the religious order of the Capuchins friars. So the Capuchins were a splinter group of Franciscan friars that in 1500, together with other religious order, they started to go on mission to evangelize the indigenous population in Mesoamerica. Those friars, the Capuchins, they were living in extreme austerity, and they were venerating the deaf. So we might think that during one of these missions, they were very fascinated by the indigenous people, which were explaining to them how to make those mummies. Well, once those Capuchins, they arrive they come back to Europe, and of course they arrived in Italy and also in Sicily. They founded a small church outside the city walls of Palermo at around 1535. And in a first moment, they just built a small church and a small pit underneath the apsis. The pit was the grave where the deceased friar were buried. Well, after a few decades, the space to bury those friars was no longer enough. Therefore, those friars, they needed more spaces. Therefore, they started to excavate another tunnel underneath the apsis. But when they come and they arrive in the pit and they were trying to find more space, they realized that those burials and the friars they were naturally mummified. And so, thanks to the Sicilian climate condition, which is dry all year long, and the presence of the stone, which naturally absorb the moisture of the bodies, those mummies were naturally created. But of course, in the first moment, when the friars saw the other friars naturally mummified, they thought more as a heavenly sign. And they decided to exhibit those 45 mummies standing in one of these corridors that they were excavating to create more space for the burials. In this way, in around 1600, the people of Palermo, they started to come to admire the miracle of the Capuchin friars. So we are almost sure that in a first moment, only the friars were buried in this pit and in one of the longer corridor. But then in a second moment, later on, around the end of 16, beginning of 1700, the Capuchin friars, they were accepting other bodies. And so this is the reason why we found laying bodies and standing bodies just to create more space for the burials. I can just tell you that the number started to increase and to create a mummy was quite expensive, so it was only the wealthy part of the local population who could afford one of those burial place. I can tell you that in a conversion of euro nowadays, one of these burial could cost around 50,000 euros. So, in a first moment, only the friars were allowed. In a second moment, only the people who were supporting the Capuchins were also allowed to be buried there. And then anyone who had the money to be buried inside the catacombs, who could afford this burial, then was paying the Capuchins to create the mummy. Around 18 and 1700, 18 and 1900, the method of the Capuchins, it becomes more complex and more effective. And at the end of 1800, beginning of 1900, they were using also some doctors to produce the mummies. I'm talking about one of the last examples of the mummies that we do have inside the catacombs, which is the body of a very young baby. She was only 2 years old when she died, and it's a mummy produced in 1920 by a doctor from Palermo. His name was Alfredo Salafia. And so let's say that till the 20s, 1920s, in Palermo, they were still producing mummies. And we can count today almost 8,000 bodies inside the catacombs. But also we can say that those catacombs are divided. So we do have different corridors which were excavated by the friars. And in one corridor, so we found the bodies of the friars. Another corridor is only for the men. Another is only for the women. And then we do have two chapels. One is for the children, and another one is for the virgins. So actually, due the large amount of spontaneously mummified bodies and mummies which were created, we can say that the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo, they can offer multidisciplinary survey about the study of these remains. We can study new restoration protocols. For example, there is a research going on in the restoration going on inside the catacombs. And to sum up and explain a little bit why we do have so many mummies in Palermo, I choose a small part of a very fascinating movie done by a Sicilian filmmaker. His name is Francesco Rosi. The name of the movie is Cadaveri Eccellenti, and I think this part of the movie is very interesting and very helpful to make us understand why the people in Palermo and how people in Palermo had a relationship with those mummies. So, first of all, mummification answer one of the most ancient needs of all human beings. And so it's a race against the time. It's a way to preserve the body against the decay of the flesh. But Sicilians, they were going inside the catacombs In specific time of the year, I'm talking about Easter time. They were going there for Christmas, New Eve, for the birthday of the mummies. They were going there. They were asking for advice. They were bringing food. They were talking to them. So they had a relationship, but they were considering them still part of the family, still part of the realm of the living. And this make us understand that the Sicilians, so the people in Palermo, they were going to the catacombs till few decades ago. They were still going there, and there were still people that could say that I have one of my relatives buried inside the catacombs. So I think that these explain a little bit also the mystery of existence, and also it makes us understand that we are all part of this big circle of life. So we are born, we will die, and we are not separated from death. And so understood the Capuchin friars in 1500. And I think that this is a sense that still nowadays reunite a little bit us all. Those mummies were also part of the life of the Sicilian families. But if you want to learn more and answer to more questions, the reasons why so many mummies are to be found in Palermo, I just invite you to the full version of this topic, which is going to be on the 30th of October, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you want to join the next conversation about the catacombs of the Capuchins, you can just click to the link below to sign up. Thank you again.